listeners, to the BizBlend podcast, the show where soulful leadership meets sharp business strategy. In today's episode, we are stepping into a story that blurs the lines between capitalism and consciousness. Listeners, our guest, Louis Kim, is not just a successful entrepreneur who's built and sold over $50 million in businesses. He's also a spiritual leader, a private equity investor, and a fierce advocate for healing through ownership and plant medicine. And from the boardroom to the sacred circle, Lewis brings a rare but authentic balance of business insight and also soul wisdom. Trust me, listeners. So, together in this episode, we'll be exploring how personal breakdown can lead to powerful breakthroughs and how aligning our inner purpose with our outer mission can reshape not only our business outcomes, but the legacy that we leave behind. So let's quickly dive into this conversation. So, Lewis, welcome to the show, and I'm absolutely honored to have you here with us.
Oh my gosh. I'm like grinning ear to ear from that intro. That was so unexpected. Thank you for that.
And unexpected in the way because let me tell all the listeners that before beginning the conversation, we were having quite a wonderful chat in there, and how uh, we mentioned about what we are trying to achieve, or how do we envision that how this platform or the podcast is trying to do what. And somewhere in that conversation there was legacy involved, whether it's for 10 people or just one person, or maybe thousands and millions of listeners out there. And that this is, I don't know, it's a coincidence, or this is how alignment works, but this is really interesting, Louis.
Well, when you said legacy, I started laughing because the name of my firm is Yusan Capital. And Yusan in Korean, literally the interpretation is inheritance or what you leave behind. But it can
Okay.
also mean legacy. And so when the firm was formed, it was very much up behind this idea of legacy and the
Mhm.
impact of what you leave behind. And not necessarily just the monetary things you leave behind, but ultimately the indelible fingerprints that we leave behind on people, resources, and things. So it's it's I don't know if you did the research on that before or if that was that came up because of our conversation.
No, that I need to ask my writer then. I okay. Let me take it down. I need to ask my writer. How did you
Well,
find this out?
I appreciate the honesty. Um, it you know, this is a very interesting life that I've gotten to here. Uh,
Mhm.
I grew up in a family of entrepreneurships. I bought my first business when I was 21, 22. May have been 23, and it's been a lifetime of buying, selling, building small businesses that has evolved into a more organized form of essentially what my family had done when I was a child, which is through the use of investor capital and going out and just pursuing larger ventures. Um,
Mhm.
Life is not without its hiccups and roadblocks that we run into. And somewhere in my early to mid 30s, I
Mhm.
went down a really dark path, and it took a few years. Exited from some things, and there was a period of time of just a lot of self destruction. And it was this idea that here there was this amazing life happening around me. I had this woman that loved me. I have these thriving businesses going on, but just a complete lack of happiness. Constantly asking myself, why am I not happy? And finding myself in depressive states, and ultimately pursuing those patterns of things that are just not healthy for you. Ultimately, this is something I've adopted and understood now. Self-destructive behavior, all self-destructive behavior is ultimately leading to a path of death. It's just a question of how long it takes, right? For me, it was overconsumption of a variety of things, but it's no different than someone who's addicted to drugs. And in the heart of
Mhm.
the drugs you're on, it could be, a matter of a few years, but some things take a lifetime. And finding this path of spirituality and consciousness really helped evolve and change and really align who I am, and create an entire business and path of entrepreneurship that could be aligned in a way that matches my values, the mission that I have, and moving in that direction. And really, those plant medicines were a major component of allowing myself to reach and sense the place of consciousness. S-
That's great. So, do you think, or do you feel, I mean, it's a very sensitive, it can be a sensitive question, but do you feel guilt that your personal life affected your professional front? Because um, this can definitely, I mean, in fact, my co-host Avik, he had shared his story, and there was, kind of reminded me, there was a small component of that conversation that he shared where a personal decision with respect to a relationship, it deeply affected him. So that's where many of the professionals, entrepreneurs, they kind of assume that I should absolutely keep away my personal life away from my profession because it's going to completely destroy me. Do you feel guilt that you let that happen with you, or do you feel that whatever it was, I still came out of it and I learned from those experiences?
Yeah, so I think this is a great question because the role of ownership, when you have a business or you're an entrepreneur, there's this feeling that there's the compartmentalization, but then there's this push and pull, right? I mean, for all of us, we spend more of our lives interacting with those that we work with and that we build things with than we do with our own families. It's just the nature of life and being able to produce an income to live. And so very much as an entrepreneur and owner, you can get to a place of this constant pull of I'm not doing enough for my personal life and family, or I'm not doing enough for the business. And so it's very interesting how you frame the question around the guilt over the business, because I think that is something that happens very frequently. And at the same time, you see relationships and things fall apart as entrepreneurs or business people because so much attention and focus is here. And then this person living with guilt about their personal life. Um, for me, I think I was in such a dark place. The guilt and the shame that I was feeling was more about you reach a place where you have this opportunity, you have this liquidity, and if you get to where you think you want to get to, and then you
Mhm.
realize that it's not what you were seeking. That is the issue that was much darker for me than the business itself, than not being enough for the business. But as an owner, I think it's a very common thing to be pushed and pulled and have these senses of guilt and have these senses of shame that you're not doing enough for other things. But we're all human, right? We all have the same 24 hours a day that you have, that I have. I don't care where you on in the world. We all have the same number of hours.
Mhm.
It's what we do with those. And what I have found is when you can go inward to yourself, and
Mhm.
regardless of whether or not the guilt is on feeling that you're not doing enough for your family, community, church, the places that you go spiritually, or for your business and your people, and you're not doing enough there, when you get to a place of alignment with yourself and your values and you have clarity, I think there's no better gift for any individual than to have absolute clarity about their purpose, about their mission, and about their direction. When you have those things, there is no guilt, there is no shame because you're totally aligned to this mission and path that you're going to. And the reality is, you know, the work-life balance is such a myth because, like I said, there's limited number of hours. And it's either there's a way with this alignment to create almost a level of convergence because now you have family and other people wanting to understand your purpose, right? And wanting to share what you want to share because your vision and you are so clear about where you're going. Um, and what I found is the more clear I am about the direction and the more my family sees me in a way where, hey, we're going somewhere, right? That it's kind of they're coming for the ride, and they may not be the right decision for everybody, but I know it's the right one for me, and I think that's the key, is when you can get to that place of clarity, get to that place of mission, then those feelings of guilt of being pulled one way or the other, go away.
I couldn't agree more. That's very beautifully and simple, yet in a simple way put together. And Louis, when we talk about entrepreneurship or business, um, the conversation around soft skills or this emotional intelligence, intuition, I'm really happy. I feel really happy that now there people are talking about this. We are talking about intuitive leadership, servant leadership, bringing on the element of emotional intelligence, spiritual intelligence into the conversations around how a leader should be.
Mm.
uh, where do you see how do you see the intersection of this sacredness, the soul component playing into the hard world of leading yourself, leading others?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked this question because part of my mission is to be a clear and bold example of a heart-centered leader. And,
Mhm.
I have no problem in middle age saying that this is a lesson that was taught to me by my mother. In my family, when I was growing up, my mother was the entrepreneur, and my dad was more of the artist. And
Yeah.
she really exemplified this, and she did it with her heart and soul. And what it's
Mhm.
taught me about leadership and about where you move and how you move people, you're absolutely right. The emotional intelligence of being able to connect and being
Mhm.
able to show people, and this goes back to that thing of clarity of having this vision of where you're going, and you compel them because you care, and you give them and make them feel the drive and the mission. It's very important. Um, they've done studies here in the United States where there's an income threshold, and this was those studies that I'm referencing are probably about almost 10 years old, so these income levels are probably higher at this point. But for most workers at that point, it was around 75,000 a year, was the threshold. And once you achieve that threshold, for most workers, marginal incremental gains in income did not matter as much as how their, employers or their business, how they felt, like, how they felt about, the productivity, like, was it important what they were doing? So those intangible things outside of that. Um, in the US right now,
Mhm.
1 in 6 employees are what they call actively disengaged. And
Mhm.
and that just doesn't mean that, like, they're not showing up and that they're, like, that they're not fully engaged. They are actively disengaged, which means those are people getting paid. 1 in 6 employees getting paid to
Mhm.
actively be disruptive, cause problems, basically the problem child, the prototypical problem child within an organization. Why
Mhm.
do you think that is? It's because people have felt for a very long time, um, underappreciated. They feel as if they don't matter. The corporate idea and the hierarchy that's constantly pushing, especially on publicly traded companies about shareholder value, has really created this schism between management and quote unquote labor, and it's because the soul of these businesses are gone. And you look at some of the businesses in the United States, like Costco, which are continuing to thrive regardless of markets, and they tend to be the businesses that really take care of their people. I believe we are on the cusp of a lot of changes. I think there will be more of an emergence of these things where you are paying more attention to the intangible aspects and caring more for your people, because ultimately, the better that your people are taken care of, the more productive they are. The more productive they are, the more they care, and the more they're driven by the mission, the more the company and everything does better. And that's where I think as a leader, learning to really connect and care with people is absolutely one of your greatest skills. Um, there's the saying of people won't remember what you say, but will remember how you make them feel. And as a leader, I think it's very important that we are cognizant and aware of how our people are feeling and responding, because it matters.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's golden and that's fundamental. Fundamental. Um, Now circling back, going back to when you mentioned about Yusan Capital, how it symbolizes, legacy. It's not the average PE firm that we get to know in the investor circles. How do your guiding principles, some of them, if I can name, like radical collaboration, abundant prosperity, how do they translate into your investment approach? Do you see um, an embodiment of this intersection of uh, soul alignment and business acumen in the founders that you invest in, or it is the business, or it is the market? I mean, how do you see that? And especially from a perspective of a PE firm, this will be really, really such a you know of huge interest to me, and I'm very sure for our listeners as well.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because what we go through, um, is we almost have to, when we interact with a lot of our potential limited partners, uh,
Mhm.
we have to align ourselves with the right limited partners first. And so I'll start here in that we are absolutely 100% committed to protecting the investor capital, and we are interested in growing it in the long term, and we are interested in ensuring that those gains are going to be beyond where they could go with other firms of our size. And we
Mhm.
believe that happens through this philosophy, what we're talking about, where you're making that connection where capital becomes the resource. It's any business, I don't care what it is, whether it's a corner taco stand or pizza shop or Amazon. Um, Liquidity and cash flow are the lifeblood, right? It's like cash is the oxygen for a business. And so there's a huge responsibility that we come into when we invest, and um, we purchase companies when we come in there, that we're taking over this existing legacy that we're looking to grow and expand over the long term. We think the best ways through these values that we have, because the values that we're talking about, these things aren't rocket science. These things are the types of values that these closely held companies that have been around for generations have operated with for a long time. And I mean, for their existence. And that's why we think um it's so crucial. And you see it. I can give you a big example that in it from a larger scale. There's a firm called KKR, and they're one of the largest PE VC firms out there, and they have recently started to adopt this model with a few of their last investments where their focus is on making the employees shareholders in the company when they go acquire. And so they get equity. And when they exit from these businesses, these
Mhm.
people become, I mean, some may not achieve huge levels of wealth, but it becomes life-changing money, you know? Um, for us, we see this in our own investments where things change, you know, people when they feel more appreciated, you will see the performance. And look, I, I'd be lying to you if I tell you if there aren't certain people that see it as an opportunity to get over or to kind of take advantage of a situation because they think leadership is not as strong. But I assure you, we're very serious business operators and owners when we go into these things. But when your people feel cared for, your product and service, which is ultimately delivering to the customer satisfaction rates go higher. You see it across the board. And so the investments as a whole, they thrive when our mission and value are being implemented and you see them being delivered because we're all aligned. And that alignment is very, very, very important.
That's true. That's true. And although there will be a lot of nuances to this, that you know, uh, people centric leaders or businesses, they may look weaker because you may not be able to have everyone aligned or genuinely having that intention, but if we look at the bigger picture, I absolutely agree with you. Absolutely. This is tried and tested. This comes from my personal experiences when I was a part of, whether it's an enterprise or a startup. It's irrespective of the magnitude or the size of the company I'm working with. If I'm not personally, as an employee, I'm not aligned with the product or the service or the um, manager or the leader I'm working with, then it will definitely show up in my work as well, unintentionally.
What you just said made me think of I, I I recall being told this anecdotal story about I forgot the gentleman's name, but if you look him up, if you Google him, it's very easy to find. But he was a billionaire when he passed away.
Mm.
It was the largest confectionery in Japan,
Yeah.
and he started very very small. And up until the day that he died, he said that the reason he did so well is that every cookie, cracker, whatever that came out of his factory was injected with love. And he genuinely meant like this spiritual love, where I think the story goes when he was small and he was starting as these things were being produced, he would he would almost give a like a prayer to these things that were going out as they were like being sold one by one. And then there are stories that even as he was aging and he was like, no longer running the day to day, that he would go down to the factory line and kind of be there as they're going out and then wishing. I mean, it's listen, I have to tell you, a little over 10 years ago, if someone had shared this story with me, I would have laughed in their face. Um,
Uh-huh.
but he would sit there on the line and continue to impart love. And really, if you think about it, whether or not you believe in the spiritual or you feel prayer works, think of the mentality of that, of how that translates for that business owner to his people, to the products, to the ingredients. When you come from that place of care, how differently everything runs, right? And then you create this culture around caring. You can't tell me at a certain point your customer or your client feels the care that comes through with that because we've all experienced it when it's bad, right? And I think in the marketplace as a whole, we have also forgotten what it feels like when it feels good, and that's why I think there's certain brands and companies that do so well because they remember that the customer experience is the most crucial thing you can have, and for any entrepreneur, you can't forget. If you have no customers or clients, you have no business. You're essentially you're playing a game. You're not accomplishing anything. It's when we deliver that product and service with exceptional value that you have lifelong customers. And I believe that comes from this whole conversation we're talking about, where the leader is leading in such a way that's not
Mhm.
attempting to extract, but is it attempting to produce and really inject value. So you have people with you forever.
That is golden. That is golden. And as you mention about this, I think maybe it can be done as an experiment. Just consider your team members or the employees as the first customers of your product or service. Try to get their feedback, because many a times, as a founder or um, as someone who is, we tend to become obsessed with what we are building, and that obsession may lead to having a wall created, a mental wall, which will obstruct any form of constructive feedback. I mean, it will be really disheartening to know maybe this particular feature in your product or maybe this aspect in your service is not working out. And that's what I strongly believe, that, listening to these kind of feedbacks, they'll help you in the long run. It may be disheartening initially. You may have to do huge overhauls and make huge changes. It may personally challenge the way you believe or you think, but you know, take it, from the ones who are working on the front. So that's what I believe.
Yeah, I believe, that we need to be fulfilled. We can have all the success in the world, all the money in the world, and it's meaningless because we can't take it with us. And fulfillment for me comes in knowing and understanding that you're having the impact on people, the lives, all of your stakeholders, the people around you in such a way, that it's positive. It's continuing to be there. And if you can leave lessons and tools and skills, and those are all great, but it really, if you really help people achieve the greatness that's within them, because we all have it, we all have this amazing greatness. And for me, this path that I was on,
Mhm.
I could hear the echoes of it, but I was so wrapped up in the noise of my own suffering and self-pity that I couldn't hear it. And once I allowed myself to hear it, it emerged in such a way that it's like this fire within me, and a fire that you can't put out. And it's allowed me to lead myself in this way where, I will lead myself and others from a place of empathy and love. But again, don't get it wrong. We have very high standards, and we
Yeah.
continue to push those high standards, which means that we will give people the opportunity to perform, make mistakes, because if you don't allow people to make mistakes, um, you'll never succeed. I mean, perfection is the lowest standard. I mean, that's something Tony Robbins says, which I absolutely believe. It is the
Mhm.
lowest standard because it's the unachievable standard.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so being able to have a high standard, but allow for those mistakes to be made, make them quickly, and you keep moving, you allow people to develop and grow, because that growth, really is so important for people. Um, yeah, I mean, it, you know, f- it's a funny life we lead, because I can tell you, as a child, when I had visions of what I wanted to do and be in business, I can tell you the last place I thought I'd be was, having this conversation about consciousness and capitalism. I think that's where I was always being led, because of my own mother, because of the giant heart she had, and like no matter what she suffered through, she would
Mhm.
always be out there helping people. I mean, I can remember when they owned a liquor store in, near DC, and they bought a business from a broker, all lies about how much money it was making, right? Like, all lies. So they went in thinking, "Oh my gosh, this is gonna be great. We can send, kids to college and no problems, right? They get into the business and the revenue was like 50% of it, right? And, they bought it, as one of those situations, I think in hindsight, my mom was like, this was probably one of those too good to be true deals because the owners were willing to finance, they were owning the real estate, all of these things, and they get into it and they find out it's 50% because it's been run into the ground because the actual owner passes away. His children were doctors and lawyers, and they didn't want it, and so it had been unattended to for almost a decade. They go into it and they suffered a lot. I mean, the license back then in Maryland was such that, there were set hours that they had to be open, and they had to open at 8 o'clock, and the business closed at 2 a.m. because it had a bar. They did that for 9 years, and they suffered. They ultimately built this thing and turned it into something that really grew, and they sold it for a profit, and then they ended up going into something far more, um, f far better in terms of a lifestyle because the hours and everything, but what I wanna share is I share that background to say there was a lot of suffering. That period of time, the only time I could actually see both of my parents in elementary school was to spend my summers with them at this liquor store literally all day. That's actually I always joke that my first job was at 8 years old, because there was a time when, it was so busy, some people didn't show up, my mom had no choice. I was like, "Let me help you." She taught me how to run a lottery machine, and the store back then, the lines would be forever because there were not many lottery machines, and so I sat there and I learned to run the lottery machine and did that for hours to support. But with all of that happening, my mother always found a way, 1, to treat her employees with absolute respect and
Mhm.
absolute care, and we're talking about people that, for the most part, they had, one of the managers there was a former police officer, had a giant gambling problem, would
Mm.
would be, would be stealing, but would be kept because he provided the security because everyone knew he was a police officer at one point, or the guy who was a boxer and had, not made it, was a degenerate alcoholic, would come in and clean. He was kind of like the cleanup guy, and
Mhm.
stories of, like, other Korean immigrants that would come that would look for a job, and she would give it to them, but she always came from this place of love, even if they stabbed her in the back, and she was the homeless people loved her because the homeless guys that lived around there because she would come in the morning, they would ask for, like, some money, and she's like, "I can't give you money." And she'd be like, "Well, if you sweep the parking lot, I can give you a 12 pack," because that's what that guy needed, right? Like a 12 pack of beer. But I think those lessons really taught me how important it is to really care about everybody around you and everyone in the sphere of your business because it matters. And that stretch at that time, those liquor stores that were in this area from that into the DC border were constantly being held up. It was a
Mhm.
very regular thing. I mean, talking with shotguns and everything. And the 9 years that my mother was in business, she took something that was struggling and my dad as well. I mean, he was a part of this. They sold it for a profit, but not one time did they ever get robbed, right? That doesn't happen, because you're focused on just making money, right? That happened because she was protected. And she was protected by the community, and the community grew to the point where they loved this person and cared about this person, where the point where half of the customers were calling her mama, by the time that they had sold it. And I think that has taught me when you look at this as a more organized way and you look at it professionally, you can bring that ethos into these things so that this care and love exists because ultimately it becomes a fuel that burns and energizes an operation and within a business.
Wow. I can't imagine. I mean, that's how, irrespective of what you are doing now, our childhood experiences, they shape the way
Yeah.
we set on, whether it's through our parents or our friends, um, or the environment we are in. These experiences, they form the most fundamental um, base of what we are set on.
Uh, I just
Mhm.
I don't know if this will make it in or not, but in this moment, I just want to comment. That was a story I didn't think I'd be sharing, and I think it has a lot to say with this conversation, and even the pre-conversation we had before. So I really want to thank you for guiding us this way because it's it's a great thing to make a connection in that way because I hadn't thought about those memories in a very long time.
Oh, yeah,
It's a testament to you. So that's what I want to say.
thank you. Thank you so much, Lewis. And I must say that it's a privilege. It is a privilege that in such a great way um, your parents they inspire you for lifelong. It's a privilege. So, um, unfortunately, in the interest of time, before we conclude, Louis, if our listeners they would like to connect with you, what will be the best way?
Excuse me. Um, the best way is they can visit Yusan, Yusan Capital.com. There's definitely a contact page there. Um, you can also reach out to something called the Owner's Path. It is something that I am doing personally, which is there's an opportunity for folks who I feel so inspired and compelled to teach the skills that I have. And it's an apprenticeship program that people can buy into for a year to learn how to go buy and build businesses. So, and that's just the ownerspath.com.
Wonderful. I'll make sure to have all the links in the show notes. And uh, Louis, I don't know how to put the words, but still, that's what my writer does. So thank you so much for
Be careful.
rem-
Be careful. You don't want to give away the secret sauce.
but thank you so much for reminding us that there's more to just the numbers or the business in entrepreneurship. It's definitely homecoming to who we truly are, whether it's good or bad. It's embracing the good or bad, both. And uh, we your story, your journey, the sheer dedication of your parents and shaping the way you are leading yourself and the life and business. It proves that businesses can be both strategic endeavor and also sacred path. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
And to all the listeners, I hope this conversation stirred something within you. Maybe this is your sign. Take the next step. It can be a baby step, small step, whether it's starting that business, seeking your deeper purpose, or having that gratitude, or just learning to listen to your own truth. Until next time, stay bold, stay curious, and keep blending purpose with profit right here on BizBlend. Thank you.